Hello and welcome to this online lecture about writing to argue. It will focus on crafting arguments, disposition of a well-structured argumentation, and will end with some notes on appropriate language use. Since ancient Greece, three concepts have formed how we look at a good argumentation. Logos, which is the appeal to reason, ethos, the appeal to the speaker's character, and pathos, the appeal to the emotions and the sympathetic imagination. This slide is about the different stages of becoming a good arguer. The first stage is when your arguments consist of your personal opinion. A personal opinion is not necessarily wrong or untruthful. It might even sound passionate or heartfelt, but you might have trouble justifying your opinion with reasons and evidence. In stage 2, your argument is structured as a claim supported by one or more reasons, and the argument is much more structured and rational than the arguments in stage 1, and it contains reasons and evidence. Stage 3, ability to articulate the unstated assumptions underlying your arguments. Well, here, each reason in an arguer's argument is based on an assumption, value, or belief that the audience must accept if the argument is to be persuasive. The arguer needs to state these assumptions explicitly and support them. At this stage, you identify and analyze your own assumptions and those of your intended audience. In the fourth and final stage, you have the ability to link an argument to the values and beliefs of the intended audience. And this stage has to do with adaptation to audience. Depending on your intended audience, you might have to adapt structure, tone, and even arguments to suit the people in your audience. It's not easy coming up with something to write about. The first thing that you need to do is find an arguable issue. You can do that by phrasing an issue question. It can be a yes or no question, like, should everyone have the right to adult education? Or your issue question could be more open, and then your essay or your speech will have a more exploratory approach. In the more open issue question, you identify a problem and try to find a solution. It's then the solution that you support by stating your arguments. And an open issue question could sound like, in what ways could adult education be improved? The second stage in the process of writing to argue is to state a claim. And the claim is the position that you want to take on the issue, your brief one-sentence answer to your issue question. Yes, everyone should be able to get a second chance when it comes to education, for example. In the third stage, you articulate reasons. Your claim needs to be supported by reasons and evidence. In speaking or writing, a reason is usually linked to the claim with connecting words such as because, therefore, so, consequently, thus, and words like that. Everyone should be able to get a second chance when it comes to education because, and then you articulate your reason. You often need to find evidence in order to support your claims. You cannot just persuade your audience by asking them to agree with you. You have to provide evidence to prove that your claim is the correct one. And you can use factual data, examples, like an example from personal experience, can often be used to support a reason. You might need to use summaries of research, like references to research articles or other sources. You might want to use statistics, or you can use testimony, like interviews or other spoken sources. Sometimes you need all of these in order to prove your point. Well, how then do you know that your evidence is enough to prove your point? Well, to make sure that your arguments are as persuasive as possible, you can apply the STAR criteria to your evidence: sufficiency, typicality, accuracy, and relevance. Is there enough evidence? If you don't provide enough evidence, a skeptical audience can dismiss your claim as like a hasty generalization. When it comes to typicality, you can ask yourself the question, are the chosen data representative and typical? If you choose extreme or rare case examples rather than typical and representative ones, your audience might accuse you of cherry-picking your data. In terms of accuracy, the implied question is, are the data accurate and up to date? Well, you need to provide recent and accurate data, and that is essential. Data from 1998 on homelessness may be ineffective and even counterproductive. Finally, we have relevance. Are the data relevant to the claim? You might have accurate evidence and up-to-date and representative sources, but if it's not pertinent to the claim, it will be ineffective. A good way before you start to write your manuscript is to analyze your audience. What age are they? Gender? Level of knowledge? What does your audience already know about the subject? And perhaps even attitudes towards the subject. What does your audience think about the subject? You might also want to anticipate objections and counter-arguments, and of course find refutals to any counter-arguments. You always want to have the last word in the issue that you're arguing. This far in this lecture we have focused on logos, and we will move on to ethos and pathos. If you have ethos in your presentation, you are perceived by your audience as knowledgeable and trustworthy and fair. And you can do that by demonstrating that you know your subject well. Cite research as well as personal experience and accurately and carefully summarize a range of viewpoints. Be fair to alternative points of view. Treating opposing views respectfully is the best strategy. Build bridges towards your audience by grounding your arguments in shared values and assumptions. This will demonstrate your concern for your audience and enhance your trustworthiness. This also has a strong emotional appeal, which leads us to pathos. And I said in the beginning that pathos is an appeal to emotions and imagination, but the best way to think about pathos is not as an appeal to emotions per se, but as an appeal to the values and beliefs and the imagination of the audience. And you can use vivid language and examples. For example, if you're arguing in favor of homeless shelters, you can humanize your appeal by describing one homeless person, and that will make it more visual to whomever is listening. And you can try to find audience-based reasons in support of your claims. If you're arguing in favor of homeless shelters and your audience is concerned about the placement of that shelter and how that will affect the housing prices in a negative way, you might want to argue that housing prices might drop initially, but that in other areas the shelters have been a positive aspect to the neighborhood or something like that. And it's a way of appealing to the values and beliefs of the audience, and the audience will appreciate that, and they will not come up with as many counter-arguments as they would if you didn't include this pathos. This slide represents the disposition of your speech. You start, of course, with an introduction, preferably with an attention grabber that catches the audience attention. You might need to explain the issue and give necessary background information, and you end your introduction with your thesis or your claim. And this is 25% of your speech. The next 50% of your speech consists of the main body of your essay or speech, and you present and support your arguments and reasons in a well-structured way. Perhaps each reason is tied to a value and belief held by the audience. It might be a good idea. It might also be a good idea to give fair and complete summaries of opposing views. But you should also give some response to those opposing views by perhaps refuting the opposing views, and you can show weakness in those opposing views. You might concede to some strengths in those opposing views as well. The final 25%, the same amount as the introduction, is the conclusion. And conclusion, of course, brings your essay or your speech to a closure, often by summing up the arguments that you have used. Your conclusion should leave a long-lasting impression. The audience should remember what it is that you've said, and they should carry it with them after your speech is over. And in a conclusion, the speaker often calls for action or even relates the topic to a larger context of issues to get the audience thinking and to get the audience to experience that long-lasting impression that you want to give them. I want to end this lecture with some brief notes about language use. In a written piece or in a speech, signposting by using linking words is important. But I cannot stress enough how important it is in speech. Speech is fleeting. The moment the words are uttered, they are gone. And if you don't use linking words to make transitions in your text logical and smooth, you might lose your audience because there is no pause button. You cannot rewind a speech, and it's not a written text, so you cannot go back and revise it as an audience. Linking words are words such as nevertheless, however, moreover, on one hand, on the other hand, firstly, secondly, thirdly, and things like that. So for more information about linking words, look at Progress Gold C, page 124 to 125. You might also want to use a formal vocabulary. It's often less ambiguous than an informal one, and it boosts the ethos. People will believe you if you use a more formal vocabulary. However, think about your audience. Perhaps you cannot use a too formal vocabulary or you will lose them. For more information about formal vocabulary, you can look at Progress Gold C, pages 133 to 134, or go to the online writing lab by clicking on this link. When it comes to pathos, figurative language can help boost pathos. You can look in Progress Gold C on page 117. You can also read the text about Winston Churchill in Progress Gold and learn more about figurative language and how that can create even more pathos and create images and speak to the audience's imagination and visual sense. This was all that I had about writing to argue. Remember to look carefully in Progress Gold C, read the assignment sheet so you know what you are supposed to do, and also please visit the online writing lab from Purdue on the internet. It's a great source of information, both when it comes to creating arguments, structuring your speeches, and looking up language. Okay, thank you for listening.